Shalom, this is Levi Shore. Welcome back to Sweet and Good Torah. So we're going to do something I hope you find very interesting today. We're going to compare Sefer Yetzirah and its description of five-dimensional space and Hashem's creation in the universe. And we're going to contrast that with Albert Einstein's Special Theory of Relativity and how he looks at four-dimensional space. Okay, so I hope you find this fascinating. I actually taught this over to my physics class at Rav Schlanger's yeshiva yesterday. I'm not sure if everyone was listening. Hopefully you guys will find it interesting. Okay, so Sefer Yetzirah, it says something fascinating. It says, and this is the very first Mishnah at the end. It says, Ubara es olamo Bishalosha Safarim, Besefer, Vesipar, Vesipor. Okay, so what does that mean? So it means Hashem, it says he created his universe with three books. And these books are Sefer, which means like the text, the writing, with Sipar, which means number, like a numerical system. And Sipor is actually communication, speaking the words of the Torah. So like if we look at Parsha Breshis, there's the famous, 10 ma'amaros, the 10 sayings that Hashem speaks and brings everything into creation. So let's take a look at it. So Sefer is the text. So if we look at a Torah scroll, and hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, I'll put up a graphic version to help, because some of these concepts are very deep. If we look at a Torah scroll, so the writing on the Torah scroll is special. The Hebrew letters are a special kind of letter called a shurit. It's a special form of letters, and there's a mystical, Kabbalistic sense with these letters, that these letters can hold a spiritual light. And we'll talk more about that soon. But just from a physical perspective, like each letter written on the Sefer Torah, it takes up a certain amount of space. And if someone's a sofer, they learn how to make the bays, So usually like most of the letters will take up a certain amount of space. There's certain letters like the Lamed, which goes higher, like the final Nun, which will go lower. But most of the letters take up a certain amount of space, but they take up a physical space on the Sefer Torah. And then the Sefer Torah itself is very interesting because you can roll the Sefer Torah up. So like space can be contracted. So scientists have the theory of like the black hole, where mass is being super contracted, and that's creating a gravitational pull, that creates the black hole. And then the Sefer Torah can be unrolled. And there's, scientific theories of like the expanding universe, how like the Big Bang led to this expanding universe. But we're going to stick right now to what Sefer Yetzirah is saying. But the text itself, so the letters of the Torah itself, or what the Midrash tells us is Hashem's blueprint for the creation of the whole universe. And it says in the Gemara that 26 generations before like the creation of the universe, like Hashem wrote the Torah. And another fascinating idea is the Midrash that says that the Torah itself, so we have a physical Torah here, on earth that we write. Moshe Rabbeinu, brought us down the Torah. So we write it with a black ink on basically a white parchment. So the original Torah, the Torah that all creation is created for, Hashem's Torah, it's interesting. It says that it's written in black fire on white fire. So why is that idea so fascinating? So if we look into the Shemayim, if we look into the heavens, the scientists, more recently, maybe the end of the 20th century into the 21st century, the scientists ask an amazing question, like why is the nighttime sky, why is it black? Why is space dark? It's a huge mystery, because if we see like our sun, our one star that we live near, gives off a tremendous amount of light. And during the daytime, everything's illuminated, everything's light. We have the blue sky, the sunrise, sunset. So scientists will start talking about refraction of light and reflection of light, to get like the blue sky. And then in the sunrise and the sunset, you have more of the wavelength of the reds and the oranges and the yellows being refracted. But we're not going to get into that so much right now. But there's this concept of space could be filled with what the scientists are calling dark matter. So we can have like the matter, the mass of the sun, which gives off an illumination and gives off what they're saying is electromagnetic radiation. It gives off light. but there could also be this dark matter, and what we're calling space is filled with this dark matter. Now, the Torah, on the first day of creation, it says that Hashem Borei, we say every day, we say, Hashem was Borei Choshech, Yotzer Or, he formed light, but he was Borei Choshech. He created darkness. And Borei, Bara, is a much greater level of creation. It's what's called Yesh Me Ayin, something from nothing, whereas Yotzer, in the book of Sefer Yetzirah, is the book of formation, which means Yesh min Yesh. Yesh me Yesh. It's something from something. Where there was something already there was the raw matter already there, and then Hashem forms that raw matter into something more. Okay, so the text itself, the Hebrew letters, take up a physical space, and then even the Sefer Torah itself, it gives us this concept that space can be contracted, space can be expanded. So mass can contract, mass can expand, and we see the first concept of Sefer. Now, space itself has 3 dimensions. So there's height, there's width, there's length. So space has three dimensions to it. And we live, in this physical space. We live in the universe. We live in the world. Okay, so the next book of creation was Sipar, which is numbers. Now, this is really fascinating. We don't really deal with it so much. I mean, we deal with it in Kabbalistic sense, but we don't deal with it as a whole so much. But each letter in Lashon HaKodesh, each letter in Hebrew, has a gematria, it has a numerical value. So in a sense, there's a whole numerical code to the whole Sefer Torah. So it says, like in the Midrash, that all the letters in the Sefer Torah make up this name, this great name of Hashem, like more of the essence of God itself we're exposed to by reading the Torah, by learning the Torah. There's also a numerical value, and we're going to talk about what this means soon, but the numerical value is going to relate to time. And then finally, the third aspect is Sipor, actually speaking the words of the Torah, or the trope, laning the Torah. There's a special tune, there's special musical notes that we are also given, Hashem gave to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses at Sinai, at Mount Sinai. And then there's the power of speaking the words of the Torah. So when we see the creation, the Maisa Breshis, Hashem actually speaks the words of the Torah. So the very first pasuk, the very first verse in the Torah itself, Breshis baro Elokim, Eis Hashemayim ve'Eis Haaretz. That's considered the first speaking, the first mamaros, the first speech of Hashem, even though it doesn't say like the rest of them, Vayomer Elokim, and Elokim said, Vayehi Or, but this is considered the first speech, like just by this Breshis baro, Hashem created everything. Hashem created all the heavens and all the earth on the first day. It's a very deep subject. We're not going to get to all of it right now. Okay, so then how does this relate? So Sefer Yetzirah is later going to say that these 3 Sfarim relate to Sefer, so the text, which representing space, relates to Olam, relates to world, or relates to space. And then this has 3 dimensions. So just as each letter, it has a height, a width, and a length. So too, the whole universe, the physical space of the universe, and we'll get to the spiritual space, but the physical space has 3 dimensions. Now, what's interesting is Olam is related to the word like Helam, like hidden. And what's described in the Kabbalah, especially by the Arizal and Sefer Eitz Chaim, is that before the universe was created, so before Hashem, speaks the first word, Bereshis, of the Torah, before that all began, so what was there? Now, this is going to be the complete opposite of what science is saying. Science is saying that everything starts from the singularity, this Big Bang, all the matter, everything that exists is in that point, and then it explodes and expands. Okay, but it's so in a sense, what science is saying right now is there's kind of like nothing, everything just randomly appeared, and you had everything that ever existed in this one point, and then it expands. Okay, but what the Torah is saying, the Kabbalah, deepest levels of the Torah, the Sod level, the secret level, what it's saying is before the creation of the universe, what existed was the pure essence of God, the pure essence of Hashem, was everywhere, and it's what the Kabbalah calls, the pure essence of God is the Ein Sof, the no end or the infinite. And then this infinite being emanates what's called the Or Ein Sof, the light of the infinite, or the infinite light. So there's some kind of radiation, emanation from the infinite being. So that, before anything's created at all, that's what exists. The only thing that exists is just God. Now, what's interesting is then the Arizal, he explains this process with Tzimtzum, so that Hashem begins to, in a sense, hide himself. And he begins to contract or start to hide his essence more and more and more, finally coming down into the spiritual world. The physical world, earth. But if we were to go up from the physical world, so it's interesting, so the Rambam, Maimonides, he describes in Yesodei Torah, in his Mishnah Torah, it's also called the Yad Chazak in the Yeshiva world. So he describes that there is 9 spheres, 9 of these spheres surrounding the earth, and then the planets, are going to orbit the earth. The sun, in his model, is going to orbit the earth, and then finally the outer sphere, the 9th sphere, is the Mazalos, the constellations. So everything's like orbiting and surrounding the earth. But then we learn in the Alshich, in the Torah Moshe, that he's describing that, and it's also described many places in the Zohar and the Arizal, in many Sefers of Kabbalah, that there's these different worlds. So we are living in the physical world, which is the Olam Asiyah, the world of making. Means what we do is, like, we take things that are already created in this world, like for instance, we could cut down a tree and we finish it, we complete it. We cut down trees, we make it into lumber, then we can take that lumber and we can build a house, we can quarry stone. So we're using everything, we're using all the elements that were already created, and then we can make things. Now the next higher world than that is the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation. That's yesh mi yesh, something from something, raw matter into matter. So that's also described by the Alshich and in many other places as the Olam Galgalim, the world of the stars. So we see the stars, the spheres, that the Rambam's talking about, and that's what we're going to call that first level of Shemayim. When we look out into the nighttime sky, the planets in our solar system. Beyond that, all the galaxies, the universes, the Mazalos, the constellations, that's going to be the Olam Galgalim, and it's the world of formation, the world of Yetzirah. And what the Alshich starts to say is, what's very fascinating is, so on Earth, everything's in this physical world. But as you start to go out into these different Rikiim, into these different spheres surrounding us, everything becomes more more ruchnius, more spiritual, and less gashmius. So here on earth, everything's completely gashmius, everything's completely physical. But as you start to go farther and farther out into the Shemayim, everything starts to become more ruchnius, more spiritual. Now I believe it has to have some gashmius, or we wouldn't be able to see it. So for instance, when we look at the sun, the moon, the stars, there's some gashmius to them in that world of Yetzirah. So we can still see them. We can still see it through a telescope. We're still seeing physical light, being radiated from these stars. But they're becoming more ruchnius. Okay, so then let's go to the next level. So Sipar, numbers, the numerical system. So then if we think about it, numbers are related to time. So this is the creation of time. Now when Hashem creates the Torah, when the Torah starts and he says, Bereshis, the very first word of the Torah, in the beginning, now time has just begun. That creates time. With Bereshis, time is now started. And then culminating in that first day of creation, we have Yom Echad. First we have one day, because there's no other days, and only Hashem himself exists on that day. But now in the second day, which is now Yom Sheni, the second day, because you can't have a first day unless you have a second day. So at first it was just this one day that was created. Now then when you have another day after that created, time's now expanding. You have Yom Sheni, the second day. And now time's begun. And then Hashem set this pattern, and then each day is going to be Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker. There was evening and there was day, So in the Hebrew, calendar, we start the day, after Mariv, in the evening at night, and then the daytime is now that part of the day. That's kind of opposite like the Western world, where they start the day, from the sunrise or at midnight. Okay, I don't want to get into all that right now, but time. So then Hashem sets the pattern of the week, and now we count 6 days of the week, 6 days of creation, and then finally the seventh day, is Shabbos HaKodesh. Hashem rests. He creates Manucha. He creates, the relaxation, and it's the completion of the week. And then we take 4 of these weeks, and we get the Kodesh. We get the month. We take 12 or 13 of the months, depending on the year. This year is 13 because we have 2 Adars, and then that becomes the year. And then you can keep counting from there. You could have decades. You could have, centuries, millennium, and then the 6 millennium of world history are the 6 days of creation. But with numbers, you can start to create time. Time we're counting. We're counting seconds. We're counting minutes. We're counting hours. We're just counting. We're using mathematics to measure time. And then what's really fascinating is Hashem creates time first. But, excuse me for saying, but he doesn't place the sun and the moon and the Ma'oros until the 4th day. But then he's already created time, and he sets the sun and the moon into their orbits because they're now like a cosmic clock. And they're following the time that Hashem's created. Hashem wants basically roughly, you have 12 hours of day, you have 12 hours a night. I mean, this shifts throughout the year, but that's like the ideal day. You have this equinox of like 12 and 12. And in the times of the greatest, spiritual light right now, the greatest redemption is Nisan and Tishrei. And what's fascinating is they're like the equinoxes. There, you have the spring and the fall equinox, and there is where your day and night are more balanced, are more equal. It's very fascinating. We'll talk about when it gets unbalanced in Tevis. Okay, so then the final, so Shana is related to Sipar. The year or time is related to numbers, the numerical system that Hashem created everything with. Now the final thing is Sipor, like Hashem speaks and brings everything into creation. So there's actually speaking. Now, from the scientific perspective, speech creates an energy. It creates electromagnetic sound waves. So that vibration of speaking, speaking the letters creates like an energy. And this is what's related to, in Sefer Yetzirah, it's called nefesh, which is soul or spiritual. So according to this system, we have a 5-dimensional universe. So we have the Sefer text, the letters, which is related to Olam, which is related to the universe, the world, and that's 3 dimensions. Then we have the Shana, or Sipar, we have numbers or year, which is related to time, and that's the dimension of time. And now we have this 5th dimension, and we have the dimension of Nefesh, of a spiritual dimension. And we're going to see how that starts to fit in. But what's fascinating is in the spiritual dimension can be outside of time and space. That's why it says when we attach ourselves to the Torah, we can be Lamaila, Minateva. We can be above the natural world, above the laws of physics. We can be, above our mazel. We're not like limited by the mazalos, because the mazalos herself are in the space-time, 4-dimensional space. But the 5th dimension is something that can elevate us, way above all this. Okay, so let's switch over here to Einstein for a second. So Einstein's special theory of relativity, it really shook up like the scientific world, and it really kind of changed the direction and just the way they perceive the universe. And in a sense, we can see from this how Einstein really, in some sense, started bringing the scientific world closer to like the Torah perspective. So where did it all start? So we'll talk about the month of Tevis soon and the significance. But Aristotle, he was kind of like the father of science, and he really created the categories that science would be studied under, and he kind of created the structure of science. And his idea about the universe and time was that there was no beginning and there's no end. Just the universe always existed, so there's no beginning to the universe, there's no end to the universe. It just is. And that's this other idea of like mikra. Everything's like chance. And that's very ingrained in scientific thinking. Now, the other aspect is same with time, that he, said that time has, no beginning, no end. Just time existed. Right, so Einstein really started to shake things up. One question he started asking is, Einstein started asking the question is like, does space exist outside the universe? Is there space outside the universe? Or does space only exist in the universe? And he asked the same question with time. Does time exist outside the universe, or does it only exist inside the universe? So this was kind of like a revolutionary idea when he publishes the Special Theory of Relativity. Because then what Einstein's getting to is, he's getting to the fact that space and time only exist inside the universe. So only inside what science calls the known universe, is there space and time. And outside of that, there's no space and time. And that is exactly, as far as I can tell, the view of the Torah, especially in Sefer Yetzirah. Now, when, like a Navi, when a prophet has a prophetic experience, they're taking their own ruach, like their level of the soul, and through a meditative state, sometimes during sleep, you get a prophetic vision. They're traveling outside. They're traveling into the spiritual worlds, and there's spiritual worlds above space and time. So we said, like, there's the world of Yetzirah, and that's, the world of the Malachim, the angels, and the world of the stars. And it's what we can see, through the telescope, but we can't see the Ruchnius aspects of it. We can't see the Malachim unless they're clothed like in a physical body. But then there's even worlds beyond that. So there's the world of Berea, the world of creation, and that's called the world of the Kisei HaKavod, the Hashem's throne of glory. And there, there's Ezekiel is given the prophetic vision of the Malachim, the angels, and the workings of that world and the throne. And now what's interesting is when you get into a purely spiritual dimension, you're no longer constrained by space and time. And how things work in a spiritual dimension is, when things are alike, they're close together. When things are different, they're farther apart, because there's no space, there's no time. So it's like when, like we say, the Siddiqim are around, or dancing around the Shekhinah of Hashem in Olam Haba, in Gan Eden, in the spiritual Garden of Eden, because the Tzaddik, he works so hard and makes himself like Hashem. So his neshama, his soul, is very close to the Shekhinah, the emanation, the pure essence of Hashem. And then, chas v'shalom, if someone is doing averas during their lifetime, following the path of darkness and evil, that soul becomes very far from Hashem, and very far now from the Kisei HaKavod, from the Gan Eden, from the spiritual Garden of Eden, and that person, chas v'shalom, is in Gehenna. He's in a spiritual dimension far from the presence, of Hashem. Even though Hashem is this infinite being that fills all, but it's interesting, there's this aspect that Hashem is more manifest, and so he makes himself more manifest, since he's just hiding, since the universe itself is just him hiding in this cloak of space and time. He manifests himself more in special areas. Now, this leads us to one aspect of science, that science doesn't want to deal with spiritual dimension, and we'll see why. So if the genesis of science is Aristotle, so where does it all come from? So the month we're in right now, Tevis, is very fascinating. So on the 8th of Tevis, the Torah was translated into Greek. So King Ptolemy, who was one of the Greek conquerors of Egypt, he ordered 72 Chachamim, 72 Torah scholars, to translate the Torah into Greek. So what was the damage to that? And it says the world went dark for 3 days. Through the 8th of Tevis, through the 9th of Tevis, through the 10th of Tevis, the world went dark. So why is that? So we said before, the special lettering of the Sefer Torah, in the Lashon HaKodesh, the special Ashuris letters, even though they're in the physical world, they're kind of like kalim. They can hold these great spiritual lights, especially emanating down from the Or Ein Sof, this infinite light that Hashem sends down through all these worlds, coming into the physical world. And these special letters of the Torah can hold that light. So when I heard this explained, it's really fascinating that when it says in the Torah, the word in Lashon HaKodesh, it contains all the drashos, all the halacha, all the different aspects that come out of those words. But once it's translated into Greek, it just becomes another book, chas v'shalom. It just becomes a book. Like someone could read a book on philosophy, they could read a book on science, they could read a Harry Potter book, they could just read the Torah. It just becomes another book, and it doesn't have that transcendental quality anymore. It doesn't have that connection to the infinite. So it was a great darkness that was put into the world for 3 days, because now the other nations have the translation of the written Torah, but there's so much more. There's deeper dimensions to it, and then that the Torah, the written Torah, the Torah Shebiksav, is part. The part of the Torah also is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, speaking all the halakha of the Torah, all these hidden aspects that aren't written down, but were also given to us, at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, and that dimension is now lost, and and so it's a great darkness when it was translated into Greek. Now, on the 9th of Teves, another thing happened. Ezra HaSofer, who some of the Meforshim say was Malachi Hanavi. He was Malachi, who was the last of the prophets. So after Ezra dies, the age of prophecy ends. And it says, there's a midrash that says on this, I believe it was on the same day as Ezra dies, Alexander Mukdan, Alexander the Macedonian, or Alexander the Great, he begins his conquest of the Greek Empire. Now, what's interesting is who is Alexander the Great's teacher? His teacher was Aristotle. So then Aristotle's philosophy, the genesis of all of science, now begins, and it starts to spread throughout the world, and this enters a new phase for the world. Now, Nevuah, prophecy, has been ended. That spiritual connection has been cut off from Hashem, and now we enter the days of the Greek Empire, and then eventually when they're conquered by Rome, from Aesop's children, it's going to be this Greco-Roman, but the ideas are just going to be transmitted. They may be translated from Greek into Latin, but the ideas remain. And the Greeks had an idea that the human was the center of the universe, not this infinite being. So they didn't want to give credence to Hashem as being the infinite creator, the infinite sustainer, the one who's running the world. Now the human being in the Greek mind becomes center of the whole universe. And it's interesting because the Greeks, their gods they worship are all they're all human beings. They're in forms of men and women with supernatural power, but they're humans. They're worshiping the human. And we see this in the politics, in the culture of the Western, the Western civilization. We hear, ideals of human rights, human dignity, the Declaration of Independence. These are all based on this Greco-Roman, human-centered universe, and science itself is constrained by these same ideas where the human's the center of everything, right? So you can have Darwin saying monkeys magically turned into people, and because they see no difference between the human being and an animal, because they're in their 5 kingdoms of life. Everything's an organism, and then there's no other category. It's animal, and humans and animals are in the same category. Whereas in the Torah, it views it that you have, a level of behemoth, a level of an animal, but you have a level above that of the medaber, of the speaking, the speaker. And what gives us this power of speech, this power of intellect that the animals don't have? It's the nefesh, it's the neshama, it's the soul, it's that spiritual dimension. So what's missing right now from science, from the Western world, or what's the difference between Einstein's 4-dimensional space and the Sefer Yetzirah's, or the Torah's 5-dimensional space, is that aspect of the spiritual dimension. And that's the whole idea, or the purpose of the mitzvahs, is that we can bring the kedusha, we can bring that spiritual energy into the physical world, and we can makadesh ourselves. We can make ourselves holy with kedusha. And then the Beis Hamikdash, the temple itself, is a place that makes kedusha, it produces kedusha, brings kedusha into the world, and that's kind of the difference. And that's kind of one of the main tensions in the world right now of Western civilization, or it was the war of Hanukkah, of the Torah perspective of the world versus the Greek. It's the 5-dimensional universe versus the 4-dimensional universe. Okay, so much more to talk about. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you back again soon on Sweet and Good Torah.